This video is not intended to encourage or glorify any kind of drug use. The sole purpose of these videos is to educate you on the dangers of what these substances can do to you. Please do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video. I repeat, do not do any of the acts mentioned in this video. I have a few hobbies, but none of them cause me any joy. My parents noticed I've been looking out of it on many occasions. I have been inhaling gas fumes. I think I am addicted, and this is how it had caused physical and mental harm. I have read other huffing experiences since my first post, but I came to the conclusion that people want to scare you away from inhalants and will do anything to do so. I have not been doing it every day, and instead would wait for an opportunity where no one was around to catch me in a huff session. This surely can't be good for me. When I first started, I had a traumatic experience where my brother witnessed me huffing and threatened to tell on my parents, which terrified me and made me feel paranoid I was going to get found out and taken to the hospital or something. I have to go to college 3 times a week, and there I show no emotion, don't interact with anyone. I have no social confidence, and I've never had a girlfriend, by the way, and sometimes feel jealous when I'm there. But the addict voice in my head says, love is not the best thing in life. You know what the actual best thing in life is? Psychoactive substances. College subjects are difficult to understand, and with effort get simple work done. I feel horrible when I'm there, and even when I get home and can't huff. There are many subjects I used to be good at, but I can't do well at all in them now. Every day in classes, I have no enjoyment there and just can't wait for it to be over, thinking about huffing all the time. I started doing it after college some days where I would drive with my own purchased gas can in the back of my car. I parked up in my house, and instead of greeting my parents, I got out of the car, ran down the road with the gas and bag in hand, and popped my ass on a rock on the side of the road just above view of the road so I think cars couldn't see me, and took a few huffs. Anyway, my parents didn't come out. I assumed they assumed I was on my phone. I plan to do this ritual at least once every 2 weeks to satisfy my craving. Huffing is some sort of dopamine. It's the strongest source of dopamine I have in my life because of mild depression. That's why I want to do it again and again. Update 1, 2 weeks later. I've been huffing a few times. I was drunk and blacked out after huffing a few days this week, and had to crawl into bed at 5 a.m. and sleep into 9 a.m. And I wake up out of bed with the feeling like a hangover with a heavy head. I start the day getting through the college classes that I have difficulty with. I am dumbfounded, and it takes a long time for me to comprehend simple work. I am unable to run, have blurred vision, and I have to stare and assign all my focus to whatever task they have me do. Typing takes a long time. I can't see what is on the screen without hurting my head with the strain. It is really hard, and when they ask me to use my brain like to do college-level tasks, it is difficult because I can't come up with anything to write down. I can't concentrate at all on anything other than writing this update because I want to know how I can overcome this. The best way to describe how my head feels is heavy, fuzzy, and more emotionally empty. I just sit and stare and can only do basic tasks. When I get home some days when I was alone, I would be so eager to huff, and would just inhale and exhale over the nozzle of the gas can. It really felt like I was getting my fix. The days I did that, the hallucinations was my vision rippling, like little fragments of my vision divided into small shapes and were blurry and shaky, while the shimmering made everything seem like it was moving in and out of place, while I heard this loud buzz in my head. It feels so good. Update 2, 4 weeks later. I went to my psychologist. He immediately noticed I was intoxicated or unwell and told me I had red glassy eyes and a slightly pale face. Said I looked like I had lost a bit of weight and that my muscles and skin were unhealthy. I asked my psychologist if he would tell anyone about my new addiction. He said no, as long as I'm not in danger. I said I was addicted to huffing. I told him about what I was huffing and the effects and hallucinations. My psychologist said that huffing is extremely unhealthy and strongly urged me to stop. He said he might have to breach confidentiality and tell the hospital that I'm huffing toxic fumes, and they would have to do a medical examination on me. So after my psychologist told me this, I freaked out, but quickly decided my best option was to lie and say I want to quit. I look him in the eyes and say I will never huff again. He nods and says we can forget about telling the emergency services, but he would like to keep checking in on me and make sure my physical and mental condition doesn't deteriorate. Update 3, 1 week after the psychologist visit. I relapsed. I had been in touch with my good friend W. Me and him really get along and enjoy our time together, even though he was the one who got me started on inhalants in the first place. W may not be a good influence on me because he wants to huff with me, and I asked him if he wanted to try it together over the phone. He said he is taking MDMA once a week on the weekends to stay up and have a great time, but he would like to catch a buzz as often as he can, so he agreed. On Sunday, W drove up in his car and asked how he would do it, and I, being the huffer I am, took him to the shed and sat on the floor with my gasoline tank. Keep in mind we were home alone thankfully, so it was a great chance to get blasted. After unscrewing the cap, exhaling fully and inhaling a lungful from the tank, and then inhaling 6 more lungfuls, I got the weird shapes in my vision of every object looking more defined. I couldn't help but stare at the shed door, which formed into many different even squares and shapes, and a loud buzz in my head like a whoa 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 sound that kept dipping in and out of pitch. I giggled and tried to speak, but slurred so badly, I quickly realized I could not, and then I was numb from the effects. W laughed at me, saying how fucked I was, but I heard it in a deep voice echoing after he said it. W took a few huffs and shot up from the can, walking around the shed, smiling and staring at the lights. I was numb to everything and couldn't respond. W then was on his phone, I believe, because as I was zoning out, W was watching a video called The Absolute Horror of Huffing Gasoline. I heard the voice of the YouTuber slowed and distorted, and I took 2 more lungfuls, and the effects came back, and then I sort of passed out or was too hammered to move for a bit. Before I knew it, the video was ending, and W started to believe that the YouTuber was saying it's terrible, don't ever huff, and it's even worse than meth. W told me this, and I was stunned in how to respond. I was too spaced out to speak anyway. I didn't believe that. W then said that he knows people who do meth, and they are all crazy and psychotic, and they are constantly hitting the meth pipe. He then said something that has stuck with me ever since. Inhaling legal solvents is not that bad for fuck's sake. It's not like I'm actually consuming gasoline. This is all just superstition to scare you off it. Those words spun around in my head and kept repeating over and over in my thoughts. Looking back on this day, I truly believe meth is a lot worse than inhalants because I was having these insane trips and not going crazy. Surely huffing won't kill me, I later thought. I'm going to be okay. I was just rationalizing to myself that I was going to be okay so I can stay happy while I'm on it, even though I know it surely is not healthy. In the moment, I said unless I can get a better drug, I would keep doing this once a week or 2 weeks. W offered me some MDMA while I was taking in big huffs and coughing and feeling my throat burn with the fumes. It was expensive and I had spent all of my money on alcohol, so I denied. I had strong visuals. The carpet and wall of the shed turned into a river of red and blue and was vibrating. It was quite trippy. Even though I've never done psychedelics, it reminded me of a few trip reports I heard. The audio hallucinations were of a large figure outside, breathing with an oxygen tank, and the breathing sound it made was so loud throughout the trip, I couldn't hear my own. In the shed, I also saw a dark figure encompass the room, and my vision got darker and darker until I couldn't move, but W shook me awake, saying you've just gotten started. I reasoned the figure wasn't real and was part of the trip. Keep hitting that can and I'll take a toke or 2 with you, W said. Time went fast. We spent the night huffing and zoning out while W kept me company. I crashed at 3 a.m. from the huffing binge, and at the end of the binge, I was tripping over my feet and felt cold and hard when I hit the bed. In the morning, W was gone and my parents were back. They said I looked sluggish and unwell. I said I am fine and continued with the day. Okay, so after that day, I went 2 weeks without it, but caved after a bad day in college and during the evening at 10 p.m. and I snuck out to huff. The effects were enjoyable. It took my mind and my motives and numbed my body and soul from the pain and made me feel like I was exploring a new reality. I felt so numb during a huff session. My vision was all wavy and distorted, and I couldn't feel my body at that point. It felt like it was hard to move and do much other than sit and suck on the tank. I took as many hits as I could. I was taking huff after huff, and it made me pass out. However, when I awoke, an hour had passed. My vision was made out of moving colorful shapes. I was paranoid about my parents wondering where I was and walking in on me, and I saw a ghost figure walk in and start yelling at me what the fuck I was doing. You are killing yourself. They disappeared after I closed my eyes, but I was scared of them walking in, so I stopped huffing. In the end, I really want to quit huffing because of the shame of getting caught, or start a new drug that can cause positive effects like it. Maybe I should find a legal drug to replace the gassed out euphoria. I need help finding answers. Alcohol is fun too, but the rush is nothing compared to the psychoactive gas fumes. I start to wonder if what I am doing was just fun, or if it has serious consequences I may yet to face. I honestly don't think I can quit until I can get my hands on another drug with similar euphoric effects. I would not recommend this addiction. Being addicted to huffing has made me feel different and dissociated and slower. The only positives I can take from all this is the fact that it feels euphoric and has fun visuals and sounds while it lasts, and leaves me soon after, but the dissociative feeling isn't going away. Update: 3 weeks after last edit. I have only been doing worse in college. I dropped out because I can't do anything anymore there. My parents were understanding when I said it's all difficult and I give up, but they drove me to my psychologist again. My dad was looking at me in the car. He kept quiet, but I'm sure he knew I was on something but didn't want to confront me because I said earlier in conversation with my parents I was just taking caffeine pills, which I had, and drinking alcohol, staying up late. I didn't say anything apart from when he asked why I looked so out of it, and I said it's because of a lack of sleep. I like to act like I was sober, which I was, but I don't feel sober. My head is always heavy and I perceive things slower. My reaction time has gotten slower ever since I started inhaling the fumes. It was all not pleasant, that I'm lying to try and keep my parents unaware of my bad habit. When I was there, I was stone cold sober, but still had difficulty speaking and coming up with words to say, and my psychologist said, "What have I been taking?" because I looked and acted fucked up. I said I am taking caffeine pills and then alcohol and staying up late and feeling hungover the next day. My psychologist then talked about family and education, and that was okay. I am used to lying to people. I have to lie to continue huffing, because if everyone found out, they would try and stop me. I am worried what would happen if I actually told someone who isn't a friend about my addiction. I can't trust anyone to not try and stop me. When I am not huffing the gas, when I am supposedly sober, I feel emotionally dull and I rarely change my facial expression, react, or smile to people. I am kind of zombified. I have had only a few new people even say hi to me since I started. I wonder if they could smell gas on me, and that's why they rarely talk to me. The feeling reminds me of being on a high dose of antidepressant, but this feeling is severely impacting my ability to socialize well. People think I am sad all the time, when in reality, I just don't feel much emotion. When I do huff, I feel alive and emotional, feeling like this is a solution to all my mental struggles. Sober reality is getting increasingly harder to function in, and my desires to continue using are as strong as ever. The last few times I've seen W, I've drank alcohol and huffed. I feel so alive and fun when I'm with him, even though my body and mind feels impaired from the inhaling. W is a good friend in that he wants to hang out with me, but unless he could hook me up with a dealer to get real drugs, how can I quit? I wish I had a dealer so I could get drugs that produce euphoria without the harmful effects huffing has had on my daily life and physical condition. If I could do another drug other than alcohol, I would, but I think I have to push through and try my best to avoid the temptation to huff, but it's too hard. I've already done it 3 times in the past month, and I'm starting to feel a little better physically when I'm off the gas for a few days, but the cravings and desires make me want to do it whenever I get a chance to, without the risk of being caught while I'm doing it. I already did it in the shed 4 days before finishing this, and while it felt good, I felt bad about doing it when I sobered up. I wonder if these fumes really will harm me. I don't know if I'll post another update. It might be in a few years. I don't think I can quit because I don't want to leave this pleasure of mine, even if some trips are bad. I want to see how I can handle my life and what I can do. Can I function and recover from this addiction? And if not, will I have to live with the craving to constantly huff for a long time? I don't know. Just please don't be addicted to huffing. It may feel good, but it's bad for your body. I still don't believe it's the worst psychoactive drug you can do, but it made me feel so miserable and dissociated when I'm sober. And unless my situation gets even worse, I don't know if I'll post again. I am only 18. The first time I got high was 14. I'm 26 now. It started out really cool. I was with some veteran smokers, but they did not foresee what was going to happen. At first, it was an elating experience. I was having laughing fits. Everything was hysterical. I finally understood what the appeal of weed was all about. I remember one of the guys talking about hypnosis. He was telling me a funny story about how he had hypnotized his sister. He demonstrated by waving his finger back and forth. Then he showed me how her eyes were following his finger by moving his own eyes back and forth. Then, laughing, he said she was so fucked up she actually started swaying her body back and forth. He demonstrated it. I was watching him numbly as he swayed back and forth, and very suddenly, everything changed. I jumped up in panic and told him I knew what he was doing. He was trying to hypnotize me by tricking me into thinking he was just telling a story. His body's back and forth movements were how he was hypnotizing me. I was in sheer terror. It was like uncovering the secret of the universe. All the knowledge of the world was revealed in that instant. The panic was overwhelming. The world was not what I had thought it was through my entire life. It was brutally clear to me that I was not just another person in the web of a biological universe. This universe was mine. Not that I owned it. I was caught in a personal hell. Every character in my supposed existence was merely an actor with a well-written script. I wasn't sure why they wanted to control me and torment me, but I was sure that it was happening. I was on to them. I realized that this drug, this marijuana, opened a part of my brain that allowed me to see through their deceit. In the midst of my panic, they were telling me to calm down, that it was just the effects of the drug, that I was experiencing paranoia. But I knew the truth. I wasn't paranoid. I was finally aware. Yet it was not comforting to know. I was trapped in a hellish existence and didn't know how to get out. I couldn't trust anyone. The more they tried to calm me down, the more I knew they were trying to hypnotize me. I watched their every movement. I saw them exchange glances at each other that conveyed, "she knows," and how they were going to contain me. How were they going to put me back into my calm sleep of unawareness and ignorance? This thought frightened me even more, and I fought with all my strength to study their every move. One would wring his hands, that meant something. But what? I told him, "I know what you're doing." One would tap his feet. Somehow this movement was yet another method to hypnotize me. I guess they must have gotten scared that I had pretty much lost my mind and decided to call my brother. An emergency room is what I really needed, but hey, pot is illegal, right? My brother arrived and saw me act in a way that he had never seen. I was whispering to him in desperation, telling him what was going on. He was pretty tense, to put it lightly. Then it occurred to me that he was probably one of them. I could not handle this idea. I begged him to not move a muscle. He obeyed, half-heartedly, but his eyes were still moving. "Don't move your eyes either." I was scared shitless. There was no escape, and yet I had to keep moving. I had noticed that when any part of my body was too still, an invisible plaster cast would form around me and harden. A sudden movement would shatter it, only for another one to begin forming right after. So I paced, wiggling my fingers in constant desperation. They were whispering to each other, exchanging knowing glances, all the while telling me to calm down. It hit me that I had to convince them I was okay. It was my only hope for escape. I remember sitting on the couch and them handing me pieces of bread and a glass of water. They told me I needed to eat so that the food would absorb the chemicals. I accepted the bread and pretended to eat it, and when they weren't looking, I stuffed it under the couch cushion. I told them I was feeling better and needed to go to the bathroom. My plan was to lock the bathroom door, find a razor blade, and slash my wrists. It was the only way to escape from this life of horror. I found what I was looking for, and it suddenly occurred to me that perhaps even in death, I would not be free. What if this evil followed me after I was dead? Well, obviously, I didn't kill myself, or I wouldn't be sitting here typing this story. As time passed, I did eventually calm down enough, but I never felt quite normal again. It seemed like I had unlocked a secret, and having found the truth, I could never forget about it. Doubt followed me for years. What if it wasn't just a drug-induced psychosis? What if that drug had simply enabled me to see the world as it really was? I went to doctors and counselors, and nobody ever really explained what had happened to me. Nobody understood the gravity of that experience. As years passed, I got over it for the most part, and then when I was 21, I did a very stupid thing. I got high again. I figured that the incident when I was 14 was just a fluke. Why couldn't I get high and just mellow out and just have a good time like everyone else? Well, this time it started out pretty normal too. Then I felt myself starting to get nervous and decided to go into another room to be alone and try to calm down. I was sitting on the floor telling myself that I was just high and that the feeling would pass. I could hear the whir of the air conditioner in the upper corner of the room. Suddenly, the sound became overwhelming. It was as if there was a volume control on it and that someone was manually turning it up. 1, 2, 3. It got louder and louder. I flew into a panic. I thought it would never end, that it would keep getting louder and louder until I couldn't take it anymore. Well, this was just the beginning of another psychotic episode. I pleaded with God to please end this unbearable feeling. I swore I would never touch pot again. I won't go into all the details of this particular instance, but let me just say, I went through an internal battle of religious fears of heaven and hell. At one point, I thought I had died and that someone had pulled a sheet over my head. Everything that everyone said to me had an alternate meaning which I had to search for. I switched back and forth between God testing me and Satan trying to trick me. Physically, I was having some sort of seizure. The left side of my body was convulsing, while the right side was numb. One pupil was huge, the other was a pinpoint. I was slipping in and out of consciousness. I remember sitting in one room, but seeing myself in another, etc., etc., etc. Well, of course, as time passed, I got better, but again, I could not achieve a totally normal feeling. As weeks went by, I became obsessed with schizophrenia. I knew that something was wrong with me. At any moment, I expected to start hearing voices. I had panic attacks. I thought I was going crazy. I thought I had some sort of neurological disorder. Panic attacks drove me to the hospital on occasion. I thought I had something severely physically wrong with me. Doctors found nothing. A few years went by of struggling with panic attacks, obsessing about schizophrenia, and having strange attacks of derealization in which I was overwhelmed with fear of being conscious. Let's just say I was a total mess. Finally, after a doozy of a panic attack that lasted for hours, I checked myself into the loony bin. I told them that I was certain I was in the early stages of schizophrenia, and I was terrified. I spent 3 weeks in that hospital, having numerous panic attacks every day. It had been years since I smoked pot, but I was just as terrified as before. Guess what? I was diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder and panic disorder. I was put on the appropriate medications and slowly got better. It's been well over a year since I've been in the hospital, and I'm proud to say I am truly well. I feel great. No more panic attacks. I'm calm, cool, and collected, and I'm not crazy. I don't know why I had such terrible reactions to marijuana, but if anyone has any answers, I'd love to hear them. I know this has been a long story, but I just wanted to be able to share it with people who have gone through similar experiences. You are not alone, you are not crazy, and you really can get better. I know what hell is. I've been there, but I'm fine now, and I'm stronger for it. Listen, if you're one of the tiny percentage of people who doesn't react well to pot, don't smoke it. And if you feel like you can't get over the trauma, there is help. Go to a good psychiatrist. I promise you'll get better. So this happened when I was 18 and I'm currently 36, but I recently found Tales from the Trip and figured it might be an interesting read to share with you guys. So from the ages of 16 to 18, I was addicted to DXM, as well as doing any drug I could find, even Datura, because it was readily accessible at the store for free via retail theft. It started off with the nasty syrup, but since that was nearly intolerable to chug down, I felt fortunate when someone pointed me in the direction of where to get Biperiden cough and cold. This was a daily thing for about 6 months until, after being hospitalized from taking too much Benadryl alongside the triple C's, I had a breakup with the girl and decided I would eat 32 of them and either trip my face off or maybe die from the CPM. Well, the latter essentially almost happened, and while in the ICU they asked if I wanted help since I had just been there 10 days prior. I thought I would be signing myself into some kind of drug treatment program, but when I was cleared to leave the hospital, I ended up in the youth section of the psych ward instead. I had no intentions of ever eating Biperiden again, but as if by divine intervention, a commercial came on the TV that I never saw before or after. It was for the newly formulated Robitussin Max Strength Cough Gel Caps. This was in 2003, I believe. All the active ingredients of Robitussin Max Strength Cough Syrup without the syrup, it said. This was great news because I certainly didn't want to stop robo-tripping, but my tolerance and desire to get as high as humanely possible in any drug I could didn't quite jive with the pill, where the secondary ingredient was more dangerous than the one I wanted to ingest at the doses I wanted to ingest it. So the same day I got out of the psych ward, I went to the store immediately to see if they had this new drug in stock, and to my delight, they did. I did, however, like the kind of dark trip that Biperiden gave me compared to straight DXM, so I stole some Benadryl to go with it. It's not really in line with the story, but that trip involved seeing a giant mushroom with Mike Tyson's face and arms pursuing me through a movie theater parking lot, but I digress. With this newfound source of just DXM, I began taking increasingly higher doses. I vomited every morning when I got to school because I would take 40 to 60 pills, 600 and 900 milligrams, before school depending on store stock the night before. I would even go to lengths as far as riding my bike 4.5 miles when the store by my house was sold out. By sold out, I guess it was really stole out. In October, the year after my previous hospitalizations, which had also occurred in October, I decided to up the dose a bit more to 80 pills, 1200 milligrams. On 2 separate occasions, my dad caught me being high, and because of the Biperiden incident the previous year, he took me to the hospital. Now maybe it was from using the shit daily for a year, but on both occasions my resting heart rate was over 230 beats per minute. 233 is the number I remember seeing, and my blood pressure hovered around 220 over 180, which at the time meant nothing to me as I thought everyone was overreacting, but I now know that the heart can rupture at 220 beats per minute, and heart attack and stroke can occur when the systolic blood pressure goes above 180. But I was laughing and making jokes with the nurses and figured they were just overreacting because it's a teenager who is very high. I was hospitalized for 5 to 7 days both times, but the second time I had some delirium in the hospital later at night. I'm not sure if maybe they gave me atropine for my hard blood pressure, but I believe there was a little boy in the bed with me and was having a full-blown conversation, and the guy assigned to sit outside my room in case I went into cardiac crisis kept yelling at me to shut up and go to bed, and every time he came in to scold me, the little boy would disappear. There was also a brief appearance of Michael Jackson standing in the corner watching me, but I eventually did fall asleep and woke up relatively normal with the typical afterglow of DXM. Now I tell that story to give a full scale of the story I wanted to tell, so you know my resting vitals were on 1200 milligrams a year into my addiction. On graduation day, I was kicked out of my house for drinking half a pint bottle of liquid Roxicet, 15 milligrams per tablespoon, that I got from a friend whose mom died of terminal cancer. This started what my friends and I jokingly referred to as the summer of felonies. I was homeless and spent my days and nights eating Robitussin gel caps. I slept very little and spent my nights breaking into cars to steal money, guns, anything of value, and a few times the car itself to drive to Walmart to steal more Robogels before returning it. In a 2-week period, I ate 2 pieces of chicken and 3 baked potatoes, and always joked that I would someday write an autobiography called Robitussin and the Occasional Potato. My mental state quickly deteriorated from the lack of sleep and malnourishment, coupled with massive amounts of dissociative drugs. I would unintentionally rhyme my words constantly while talking and would be acutely aware when it happened afterwards. My friends started to jokingly refer to me as the Reverend Jesse, alluding to how Jesse Jackson often rhymes when he speaks. I was also big into retail theft to make money, and at around 4 a.m. on July 4th, 2005, on one of my late-night trips to steal more Robitussin, I ran into a kid I went to school with. I proceeded to tell him I could steal anything he wanted for half the price of the item, and he decided to pick me up when an automotive store opened in a few hours. I went out to the car that I had taken for a joyride and proceeded to swallow 80 pills, 1,200 milligrams. Around 8 a.m. he picks me up and we go into the store and he points out what he wants, which is a huge box of floodlights for his truck, but I'm wearing a very large button-up jersey, so I'm game. I get out the store no problem and go sit in his truck. He's taking forever for some reason, and a man in a tie comes out to the car and asks what I took from the store. I say I have no idea what he's talking about. He asks me to come back in the store with him, and knowing the cops are probably coming, I cooperate and start walking with him back towards the store until a clear path to run opens up. So I sprint away and up a very steep hill about 3 stories high into a neighborhood. Mind you, resting heart rate of 233 at 1,200 milligrams a year and a half previously, and I've done far more damage to my body with constant tachycardia at this point. So my heart is beating out of my chest, and I eventually feel safe and call the guy like, what the fuck happened? And after a brief description of whatever the hell he was fucking off doing instead of making the getaway, he tells me he's at the McDonald's by the store. I ask if everything is clear, if there's any cops at the store, and he assures me all is good and just sneak down to the McDonald's and we'll leave. So I make my way back down this steep ass hill and decide I better peek around the corner of the building before making my break for McDonald's. At the exact moment I peek around the building and see a cop talking to the guy who confronted me, they happen to also look at me, so I proceeded to sprint back up this hill with my heart already pounding from before, but with the added adrenaline from fleeing police this time. The cop is tripping and slipping trying to get up this hill, so I decide instead of risking a heart attack, which I clearly was on the verge of, I was going to dive under this pool deck and wedge myself as far back and up as I could. What I didn't notice in my altered state is that the owner was apparently sitting on his deck when I did this, so I quickly heard the footsteps on the deck and the guy proceeding to come down and ask me what the fuck I was doing. I said some guys were chasing me trying to jump me and he told me to come out. My cover was already blown, so I complied. At about the same time I got out from under the deck, I saw the police officer finally emerge from the top of the hill, so I immediately started running again, but was very quickly cut off by the surgeon's undercover car. Fun fact, this was the same officer who taught DARE in my 5th grade class, which I actually received an award for doing better than all the other kids. Funny how things turn out. At this point, I'm pretty sure my heart is going to give out at any moment, and I just kind of collapse onto the hood of the car in the being arrested position. I can't breathe, but not because I feel super winded, but because my heart is beating so hard it's not allowing me to take full breaths. I alert the police what's going on with me, and just like in the nature of kind helping police officers, they just denied me any medical attention and took me to the station instead. It took me about an hour for my heart to slow down to a rate that wasn't affecting me, and after charging me and confiscating my 3X Cadillac jersey for evidence, they let me go. So what does one do to celebrate not going to jail? Smoke some weed and go steal and ingest another 80 pills, of course. Cumulative 2,400 milligrams in a 6-hour period now. Every time I would smoke weed with DXM, I would enter a state called the void. It was basically akin to a walking K-hole. The world would look like it existed in layers, like some weird art with a background, foreground, and multiple layers between the two. I was never one to see UFOs or aliens or whatever other shit they say happens at a 4th plateau dose. I mostly enjoyed DXM because I believed it gave me insight into the nature of death, as morbid as that sounds. After another maybe 2 hours, I decide, hey, it's the 4th of July, let's take this to the next level, and go to another store, as I'd stolen the first store's entire stock at this point. When I go to the other store, they too are out of Robogel, so I opt to steal a box of Caricidin Cough and Cold instead. Reasoning? It's just a box like I've taken countless times, not enough CPM to hurt me, but I am sure it certainly contributed to what happened next. At this point, it is somewhere around 2 p.m., and I've ingested around 2,880 milligrams of DXM since 4 a.m. I could barely walk or talk once the Caricidin kicks in, and I am just completely trashed. My friends are going to a family 4th of July party, and obviously I'm not someone they want to bring along in my state, so I tell them to take me to my girlfriend's house. We load in the car and proceed towards my girlfriend's house. They pull over on the side of the road in some very jagged gravel, and they tell me they're running late and I'll be cool to walk from here. This is a pretty busy road with no sidewalk and about a foot of shoulder to walk on. I'm telling them they need to take me to her house, that I can barely walk, but they say, just walk, it'll help sober you up. So I get out of the back seat and stand up and kinda wobble before falling back against the car. I wore pretty baggy, loose-fitting clothes for all the theft I was doing, so when I fell against the car, my pants fell down. I bent over to try to pull them up, but lost my balance, so tried to step forward to catch myself, but of course, with my pants being around my ankles, I just tripped on them and fell forward. When my face slammed into the ground, that horizontal image of my face against the rocks froze into my vision like someone hit pause on reality. When it started to fade away and I could see regular time again, I was being lifted up into the back of the car by my friends. I tried to help them by crawling into the back seat myself, but I was completely limp and paralyzed. When I finally was able to move and got sat up, my entire body and face was covered in cuts and scrapes. I slurred, "What the fuck just happened?" as I saw the pale expressions of shock on their face, to which they replied, "You just had a fucking seizure, man." I didn't believe them at first, but after realizing just how many cuts and scrapes I had everywhere, it seemed like a pretty likely explanation for how it happened. They drove me to my dad's house, even though I'd been kicked out, but he was at work at the time. My grandfather also lived there, opened the door. Almost any time my pap noticed I was high, it would be accompanied by him furiously screaming at me. There was none of that this time. The look on his face was of sheer horror and worry, which freaked me out at the time. All he said was, "You need to go lay down, now," and not feeling so great, I decided maybe that was a good idea. After laying there extremely restless for a while and pretty certain I was going to die, I decided I was going to take a shower, both to maybe sober me up some, and also because I had been homeless and without one for quite some time in summer heat. There had been many trips where I would freak out and think I was about to die since the ICU stays, but after it happening so many times, I just kind of accepted that if I die, I obviously deserved it for repeating it so much. Despite not eating much of anything but Robitussin for weeks, I proceeded to vomit a volume I've never matched that I have memory of. Even with the water running, it completely filled the bottom of my 3x3 foot standing shower with just a few little holes over the drain. I had to lift the drain cover and basically scoop it in there, a yellow-brown sludge. I didn't get it all, so of course when my dad discovered it when he came home, he immediately knew I had used something. But I had fallen asleep at that point, and I'm guessing whatever my pap told him deterred from waking me up to scold me. I heard about it the next day though. I was still pretty fucked up when I woke up, and for once I decided maybe I wouldn't do any drugs that day. But of course, the day after, I decided to do what I've been doing for the last 2 years straight, eat some more Robogels. I can't remember how many I ate, I just remember they were the generic store brand which I had eaten plenty of times. It felt like the veins in my neck were about to rupture, and it gave me a splitting headache, and just felt dysphoric in general. I thought, what the hell did they put in these generic pills? They suck now. I tried name brand Robitussin gel caps, tried Delsum, tried Robitussin syrup, tried Caricidin. All the same awful feeling, and to take the amount I wanted to take was just intolerable. Even when I tried it 7 years ago, close to 10 years after this incident. So yeah, I basically became allergic to Robitussin by taking in such a massive dose as to cause a seizure. After 2 years of high-dose DXM, it took me 4 years to catch a cold though. Correlation? Causation? You decide. I'd like to say my drug addiction ended there, but after 3 years of recreational drug use where I just smoked weed daily and would take other shit on weekends or sporadically during the week, I eventually got addicted to heroin after shooting it here and there over that period. 15 years later, I'm finally clean from trank dope and methadone as of the last 4.5 months. Hopefully, it's for good this time. I had been drinking daily for about 8 or so years. Pretty much always beer, but pretty consistently. Started with a few beers at night, turned into a lot of beers at night until I passed out, then turned into day drinking to keep the shakes away, and again heavily at night until I passed out basically. Well, I say night, it's more like the morning as I work graveyard shifts and usually get home around 4 or 5 a.m. As you might imagine, there isn't a whole lot to do after work getting home when mostly the rest of everyone is asleep, so I pretty much got into a pattern of playing video games and drinking till I couldn't really focus on the screen and eventually pass out. It really escalated in the last 2 years or so. I would spend close to $30 a day on beer, usually a 6-pack throughout the day, and then I'd get home and drink a couple 22-ounce beers and usually put a dent into another 6-pack. I should mention I usually sprung for craft beers, which is why it cost so much. I always felt sickly to some degree, and drinking seemed to help, but of course was also the cause. I would occasionally drink too much or too quickly, convincing myself for whatever reason that before I go and do something else, something as simple as leaving the room to go smoke, I should finish the beer I'm working on, which would often cause me to throw up. I don't think I even realized how often it was happening. It got to the point where I wasn't really getting hangovers so much as withdrawals. If I didn't have a beer right after waking up, I would have pretty bad shakes and often throw up. Sometimes even if I did have a beer, or again if I drank it too fast. I had almost no appetite for the last few months. Sometimes just putting food in my mouth would cause me to gag and sometimes vomit. I lost close to 20 pounds, sometimes only eating once every 2 or 3 days. I would feel hungry, but I couldn't stomach food, so I just drank more beer, which I guess the carbs filled me up to some degree. I was a mess. My room was a disaster, filled with empty bottles that I always told myself, I'll clean it up tomorrow. Needless to say, I never did. I was stuck in this endless loop. I felt trapped and ashamed, but I just kept drinking. It became a requirement just to feel normal. If I didn't have an extra beer or two laying around after waking up, my first instinct was to head to the corner store for more beer. Sometimes I was trembling so bad I could barely get my debit card into the slot. It was embarrassing, and I have to imagine the clerk noticed, but no one ever said anything. I had completely lost control. I'd wake up confused, wondering if it was day or night, if the dream I had really happened or not, if what I did in real life the day before really happened, or if I forgot to do it, or if it was supposed to happen today. It's hard to explain. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone. All this to say that last Sunday I woke up, felt very nauseous, and vomited up the absolute worst tasting straight up black stuff, like coffee grounds almost. It was nothing like it ever happened before. My immediate thought was, uh-oh, but I tried to rationalize it as like maybe I ate something weird. I hadn't eaten in days though, or my body was expelling toxins, or just kind of grabbing at straws to try and convince myself nothing was wrong, and I went back to bed. I don't really think I actually got back to sleep, just kind of these micro dreams and going between feeling too hot and sweating, then feeling too cold and back and forth. About 2 hours later, I rolled onto my back and with very little warning, vomited again, quite violently. This time, it was a mix of black stuff and dark red blood. That's when I knew something was very, very wrong and there was no rationalizing it. This was bad. Obviously, I was scared as hell. My girlfriend was awake and outside. I went to her, trembling partly from terror, and I'm sure partly because I hadn't drank anything yet, and told her what had happened and that, I think we should go to the hospital. She went upstairs and saw the bloody mess on my sheets and floor. We immediately went to the ER. By the time the first doctor saw me, I was sweating through my clothes and white as a ghost. I explained what happened and was pretty quick to tell him that I'm pretty much a full-blown alcoholic. I'm glad I was honest. Side note, definitely be honest if you see a doctor. You have nothing to lose. They are not going to judge you. They are there to help. So they noticed the trembling right away and I was pretty quickly hooked up to fluids, but they weren't 100% sure what caused the bloody vomit. This part is kind of a blur, but I was fairly quickly wheelchaired from the ER into the actual hospital. and put into another room where more tests were done. Honestly, I can't remember all that went on. It was pretty obvious though that I would need to stay overnight, so I was wheeled into a more permanent room and was hooked up to a couple IVs. One was for fluids, the other was for the withdrawals. I think I was given a few different pills as well. This all happened between like 10 a.m. to about 4 p.m. I pretty much just slept the rest of that day. I'll try and wrap up the hospital experience here. I ended up spending 4 days in the hospital. They figured out after being anesthetized and a thing put down my throat that I had a large tear in my esophagus. They fixed that on the second day, and I spent the next 2 days on a combination of drugs to deal with the withdrawals. Without professional help, and monitoring withdrawals can get so bad they can cause seizures and all sorts of bad stuff, but I'm sure most of you guys know that. I'm so grateful for the care I received, and they hooked me up with an outpatient program for meetings, and all that which I start on the 9th. Those 4 days in the hospital were the first time I'd been sober for more than a day in like 8 or 9 years. It took a scary as hell experience in 4 days in the hospital, but I've now been sober for just about 10 days. It doesn't sound like much, but it's a huge deal for me, and honestly, I haven't felt this good in as long as I can remember. My appetite is back in a big way. I can't tell you how amazing it feels to enjoy food again. This has changed my life for the better, and if this whole fiasco didn't happen, I'd still be drinking myself to death, I'm sure. If you've made it this far into my story, thank you so much for hearing me out. I just wanted to share my experience and also encourage anyone struggling out there to seek help before it gets this bad. Some people will definitely need more than just meetings to quit. You may need medical supervision if your withdrawals were as bad as mine. It can be very dangerous to go at it alone, and there are drugs that can help, and there are doctors that can help put you back on track. Take that first step. Don't put it off like I did. In a lot of ways, sounds kinda weird, but I'm glad I tore my esophagus, and I'm super glad there were doctors to help. I was too embarrassed before, and now I realize that was just in my head. Please know that you can get help and there's no shame in it. If you're an alcoholic, you have a disease. Doctors treat diseases. No one in the medical field will judge or shame you, even if some of the people in your personal life do. And frankly, you'll probably be surprised how supportive those people will be once you do take that first step. So here's to another 10 days, and another, and another. One step at a time, but right now, I'm feeling super confident, and I'm genuinely surprised at how good I feel. I still get some shakes, but I'm taking gabapentin during the day and trazodone at night, and I couldn't get through this without it. You are loved. You deserve to feel better. Take that first step. You'll be so glad you did. It won't be easy, but you're stronger than you know. TLDR. It took a hole in my esophagus and vomiting blood to get me into a hospital where I got the treatment I needed for my alcoholism. 10 days into sobriety, and I'm feeling like a new me, and I'm determined to keep it up. Don't let it get this bad. People care more than you realize. I have always had an addictive personality. I started drinking and smoking pot when I was 11. Then I moved to coke, then acid, ecstasy, Special K, then crack, then oxys, then heroin. I never liked speed. I grew up in a small town in the Ozarks. I was raped in 7th grade. I was wasted and woke up to my coke dealer on top of me. I never pressed charges, although I did go to the hospital. That's when my parents decided they were shipping me to Atlanta to live with my uncle. It was a big change for me. When I was a freshman, I got into the acid, X and K. I got to where I wouldn't go to school without tripping. I wanted to get the highest state of spiritual enlightenment as possible. I would sit by myself and study everything. I have read a lot about Terence McKenna, Ken Kesey, Timothy Leary, etc. I wanted to know all. I'm definitely not stupid. I just make stupid decisions. I met my fiance, Chris, when I was 16 in a bar. He was 21. I was hustling this guy in pool. I have always looked older and had a fake ID. I'll be 21 in a few months. He went to jail for 8 months after we were together for 5 months. I moved out with him as soon as he got out. We started smoking crack. Sometimes we would spend $1,000 a day on the two of us. Needless to say, we were selling a lot of drugs. I would fiend so bad when we ran out. I would get the shakes and make him go out with me to get another 100-piece. A lot of times we would just ride around, so when we ran out, we would already be close to our destination and on our way. I hated copping in the hood. It was too dangerous. We hooked up with this one guy who would break us off fat. When we decided to quit smoking crack, we started drinking and taking pills like it was going out of style again. We would have a $70 minimum bar tab between the two of us. Plus, we were taking God only knows how many Xanax and Valium. It made us really mean. People didn't understand how we were together because we were constantly into it with each other. One of our friends started selling Oxycontins. Everyone and their grandmothers are on either heroin, oxys, or methadone in Atlanta. We loved it, especially me. I found my nectar. All of my friends would always tell me to just go get dope because it was cheaper and better. You could buy an 80 milligram oxy for $30 to $40, or go get a $20 bag of boy and a lot higher. I was so anti-heroin and needles, I said, fuck no. Eventually, all my friends were shooting dope. I started to get where I wasn't getting as high anymore. All of them were faded as fuck. That's how I wanted to be. I started snorting heroin. I loved it even more. One of my friends came to live with us. He was addicted to the shit and didn't have a license or a car. I started taking him to get it every day and have been doing it every day since. I was selling cars and ended up losing my job. The same day, Chris and I got into it and he went to live with his parents for a while. Meanwhile, I had to take my friend to get his fix. I told him I was thinking about shooting dope instead of snorting it. I was pissed off and depressed and I wanted to get as high as he did. He said he would hit me. I have always been deathly afraid of needles, but I let him. I was hooked from the first shot. A couple days later, Chris and I made up and he moved back in. He didn't know I was shooting it. Eventually he caught on when I would come home already high. I would never do any around him. I am very good at hiding things if I need to, but this was obvious. He checked my arms one night. I confessed. He was pissed. He said if I was going to shoot it, then so was he. I wouldn't stop. We ended up kicking that kid out, so he had a cop in the hood instead of going straight to a dealer. It didn't take long before he found the best and fattest sacks. I was at work one day and Chris had my car. He was supposed to pick me up. He hadn't been answering his phone all night. I knew something was wrong. I left early and had a guy from work take me home immediately. We lived on the second floor of the apartments. The door was locked and he had my keys. We always kept the balcony door open when we were smoking. He wasn't answering the door. I could see him lying on the couch and I can hear him wheezing. My friend climbed the balcony and opened the door for me. I'll never forget the way he looked. He was stiff and blue. He had foam stuck to his neck where he had already seizured. I ran over to him screaming his name and crying. I told my friend to call 911. They took him to the hospital and he barely made it. It was a miracle that he did. Apparently, he was lying there all day. I rode in the ambulance with him and stayed by his side the whole time. I have never felt such pain in my life. I thought I was going to lose the love of my life. 3 weeks later, I was at work at my new job at the club, dancing to support my habit, and I just had a feeling something was wrong. He wasn't answering his phone. I called back one more time and immediately freaked out. He had my car, so I called a friend to go over and check on him. It was the same situation. He had to climb the balcony. I heard, "Oh my God." I started crying and told him to call 911. I was on my way. I took a cab all the way across town. All he could hear was muffled voices and a high-pitched ring. He couldn't answer the nurse's questions, but he could understand me, just because we know each other so well. I stood beside him and held his hand. They had an air-filled heat blanket on him. I slept with my head next to him. They put him in a detox center this time, since this was the second time he went to that hospital in 3 weeks. When he got out a week later, I told him if he got back on the shit, I would leave him. We weren't really physically addicted yet. I quit for his sake. A few days later, he came home with needle marks on his arm. At first he said he was just shooting coke, another one of our favorites. It really hurt me. I made him move out, even though it killed me. I had to do something because he wasn't going to get lucky again. Some time passed and we got back together. We started back on the shit. I made a lot of money dancing and he did hustling. We ended up going on tour with the Dead. We would go from city to city and visit their ghettos. I called it Dope Tour. We went back to Atlanta to quit. We just got worse. When we moved to someplace cheaper, quit hustling because we were so junked out people wouldn't work with us, pawned all of our shit, and lost our place, we decided to kick. One of our friends helped us. She took our keys and locked us in a hotel room with her. She had just kicked in jail a few months earlier and was a speed freak now. I was puking every second. My body was flopping like a fish. We were doing about a gram apiece a day. Chris has never gotten very sick. A week later, I was starting to finally get a little energy. I started smoking and eating speed with her. I never liked that shit. I'm a tweaker-peeker, and I always think the cops are coming or watching, and everything is bugged. We did good for a month. We started back just splitting a $30 bag now. We said we wouldn't up our dose, but of course, we did. We ended up pretty bad off for 2 more years. We ended up breaking into coke machines and asking people on the street for money. I thought I was a good con. People gave me $10, $20, $100. We ended up getting locked in North Georgia. We had broken into all the machines around here, so we were traveling to do it now. I had to detox in jail. They didn't give me any medicine. I got out a couple weeks later and got locked back up 6 days later in the hood. I ran and ate the dope. They tackled me and took me to the hospital to pump my stomach. I signed a paper saying if I died, they were not responsible, but they were not pumping my stomach. I got 2 disorderly contacts and was released with a hold in another county in North Georgia. The kid that rode with us up there narked us out for hitting some machines in another county. Chris was locked up with me. He got out the first day after he was transported. I stayed there for a month. When I got out, he had a shot waiting on me. We were spending $300 to $500 a day this time. I got an abscess on my muscle on my shoulder from taking a muscle shot one day when my veins were not working, and I was jerking, puking, and hallucinating. I had to go get it cut out. A couple weeks later, I was having really bad chest pains and I had to go back to the hospital. I was supposed to go to court that morning. They issued a bench warrant even though I faxed my papers. I was picked up at work at the club. I had a detox in jail again. DeKalb County put me in the infirmary and gave me 2 Darvocets 3 times a day and checked my vital signs 5 times a day. I was transferred back up north again a week later. Another week later, I was charged with conspiracy to distribute heroin and marijuana across guard lines for a package they found a couple months before that was dropped off when Chris was locked up. They didn't have enough evidence to charge me until it happened again. They caught Chris red-handed dropping a package off and charged me again. The jail was so small that the men's cells were next to the women's. There were usually 8 to 10 women in the entire jail. The building was condemned for 9 years, so they moved us to a new jail. The men and women's cell blocks were connected with a door so we could talk to them. They dropped my charges from conspiracy to distribute across guard lines to bringing controlled substances across guard lines. I thought for sure I was going to prison. So did everyone in there, including the guards and the captain. The captain of the drug task force fought for me to go. They offered me a plea of 10 years probation with intense and a bunch of stipulations and fines. I spent 3 months. I just got out yesterday and Chris is still locked up. He is on intense probation for mushrooms. That's what he got locked up for when we first got together, but he violated. That's why he's on intense. Part of my probation special condition says I can have no association with Chris. I'm hoping and praying that I can get that dropped. I am really going to stay clean this time. I have more willpower than ever before. I wanted to kick for a long time, I just didn't know how to stay clean. I didn't want to resort to methadone, but I was about to because I didn't know what else to do. I miss my life and my love so much that it hurts more than anything else ever. We'll see what happens. Wish me luck. I have several mental health conditions. One of them is insomnia. I wasn't able to sleep straight for 3 days, and when it was day 4, I felt like I was dying. My medications are benzodiazepines and Seroquel with an antidepressant. They were not helping me to sleep at all lately. The meds I got from my doc didn't work. Since I had cirrhosis, she couldn't give me anything stronger than mirtazapine. I couldn't stand not being able to sleep. I couldn't even eat. Even if I did sleep, I would wake up in 30 minutes. So I went to a different hospital and told them the situation, but didn't mention about the cirrhosis. They offered me some haloperidol, Valium, Seroquel, but I refused since none of those would work. Instead, they were okay with giving me 5 times injection of echinacin, which contains a total amount of 25 milligrams Biperiden. So the doctor said I'll give an injection for echinacin, but we will put it in your serum. I told him if they can, just make the shot in my butt. He replied, I guess you never had that much echinacin before, and laughed. I'm experienced with opioids, psych medications, and tranquilizers, so I thought it wasn't gonna work. My father, who brought me to the hospital, went home and said, call me when you are done and I'll pick you up with a car. He thought that I'll lose my shit, but I said I'll be fine. I can go back home by myself. He said anyway, I'll be there in an hour or so. I had 20 milligrams of diazepam in the last 10 hours. They put me in a wheeled bed and gave me some supportive stuff because I was weak. Nurse came in to do the injection. I told them that I want the injection on the hip and want to fall asleep at home. She kindly rejected that and told me to relax and mix the shots in the vitamin serum. 40 minutes in, I wasn't really feeling anything besides my arm hurting so much from the medicine, and called out for the nurse and told her that I wasn't feeling sleepy at all, and she increased the flow rate of the serum to the maximum. This is where things started to become interesting. I was listening to some music with my headphones, but I suddenly started to feel a discomfort in my chest and legs. I called the nurse again and told her I was feeling a bit weird. She slowed down the serum and left. The serum was halfway there and I had that feeling that I was going to be fucked, so I called my father to pick me up. My father came, but I had to stay for 40 more minutes to finish the serum, and my father left to have some coffee till I finished. 10 minutes later, I started to have some vivid visual hallucinations on the white curtains around the bed. It was cartoonish, but I could watch it if it was projected on the curtains. I said, yeah, that works too. I forgot my insomnia for a while because I was lightheaded, and it felt like I was sobering up from a hardcore drinking night. My mouth is so dry, I constantly try to swallow, but I can't. I no longer feel my body, it's completely numb, and my vision is blurry. I start to lose myself and had severe audio hallucinations. I heard a friend of mine who was living far, far away, and I thought he was sitting next to me, and I was having a conversation while there was no one there. I've come to my senses, and I was like, who the hell am I talking to? Then a few minutes later, it happened again. After that point, I blacked out completely. I don't have a clue at all about what happened. It was around 9 p.m. and I woke up at 8 a.m. and I thought I just fell asleep, but listen to what happened according to my father. Only my father was around that night, and he said he picked me up 15 minutes later after he went to get some coffee. I just couldn't believe how messed up my awareness was. I couldn't even tell how long it has been. He tried to take me home. I recalled that I was trying to wear my shoes, but that's all of it. My old man said that I wasn't able to wear my shoes, so he helped me with that. I even couldn't get out of the bed and sit on a wheelchair to the car. In the car, he said that I was talking nonsense. I was pointing to the wheels and asking him which butcher he got those wheels from. We were home and I went to bed, but I was up in minutes again and walking around the house. I guess I took a bottle of Windex and offered it to my dad as a beer. My exact sentence was this: "Welcome to our pub, sir. Would you like to have some beer?" And he said I sprayed it around. There is a small thing I can remember. My mouth couldn't produce saliva. It was feeling like cotton mouth, but not like cannabis dry mouth. It was dry completely, and I was chewing the cud like a cow. I only remembered this, but it felt like hell. My father told me that I was talking gibberish for 20 minutes. I was making sounds, but I wasn't able to communicate, and what I was saying was not a language. I don't know how it did sound. I asked him why he didn't record this, and he said he didn't think of that and that I was having fun. After all this funny high stuff, I slept for about 8 to 9 hours and woke up and had some cereal, then slept again for 2 hours more. When I woke up, I didn't have any serious side effects, just some drowsiness. After I woke up completely, I felt a little bit of a headache and mind fog. After effects weren't that bad. I could drive a car or work without any annoyance, but I didn't find this medicine recreational at all since I didn't remember anything of what I said or what I did. On the next day, I went to see my psychiatrist and told her what happened exactly. She asked for the name of the hospital and repeated 3 times, "Are you sure of that they gave you that much echinacin?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm good with pharmacology by the way, but my roads never crossed with Biperiden until then." So after I came back home, I researched for the side effects and overdose. I was more than lucky to be alive. There's something wrong with that hospital, I know that. The doctor on duty in the nights always is the same and smoking right outside the door. Whenever I rush there with a panic attack or something, he always sends me home high, but this time was too much. I'm thankful to have an experience like this, but I wish I was able to control it. I wasn't even able to understand what was going on. I wasn't even able to tell if I was gone when I called the nurse for the first time or not. I'm not even sure that I called her. It has been 2 months, I guess, and I'm struggling so much with my memory. I used to have a great memory. I could remember my address from 20 years ago, but now I forget things I say easily. There's times that I get confused so much that I hesitated if we were in 2020 or 2022 when filling out a form at work. I'm probably going to get an MRI scan to see if something is wrong since I can't prove it to my therapist and psychiatrist. Its overdose effects are way more worse than any kind of opioid.